To understand what caused these 40-year high inflation rates. It's out of control deficit spending. I voted against most of it. But unfortunately, President Biden, when he came into office, put forward another $1.9 trillion COVID relief package when we had $1.25 trillion left unspent from the previous COVID relief packages. I was warning about stagflation early in 2021. So the solution is stop the deficit spending, stop growing our debt. But understand that a dollar you held at the start of the Biden administration is now worth only 88.3 cents. It's crushing everyone, but it's particularly crushing seniors on a fixed income.
Thank you so much. Now, I have experienced, again, the best and the worst of things. I know what it's like to struggle to pay the bills, to wonder if you'll make ends meet and how you're going to get by the next day. That's an experience far too many people in this state, far too many people across this country have to live with on a daily basis. So I know firsthand what we need to do is lower costs for working families. We need to give working class families some relief. With the middle class tax cut, we need to make the child tax credit permanent. We got to stop giving tax deductions and tax breaks for the wealthiest people. The 2017 tax plan that Senator Johnson was a no vote for at first until he orchestrated $215 million in tax deductions to his biggest donors, benefited himself personally and his own company while leaving working class people behind. We need to make sure working class people get to keep more of what they earn. He has no problem blowing a $2 trillion hole in the deficit by voting for the 2017 tax bill that benefited corporations and the most wealthy Americans. And on top of that, we have to create jobs right here in Wisconsin, the same kind of jobs Senator Johnson doesn't mind sending out of state or out of the country.
Yes, we should keep qualified immunity. That'd be a real assault on law enforcement. Senator Tim Scott was our negotiating for police reform, and he had a very strong bipartisan bill, talked about providing federal funds for training so that law enforcement can understand what works and what doesn't work. But unfortunately, Democrats played politics with that, and as they've done in so many past occasions, it was either their way or the highway. So there was a strong bipartisan bill negotiated by Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina. They could have had it, we could have passed it, it could have been improving things, but Democrats said no, it's either our way or the highway. But that's happened on gun control, that's happened on so many different issues. Democrats love to play politics, they love issues, they'd rather have an issue than actually solve a problem. Again, I would not support eliminating qualified immunity. I think that'd be a real attack on law enforcement, and I try and support law enforcement. If you want to reduce crimes, my opponent says that police officers don't commit crimes. Are you kidding me? You have a police presence somewhere and crimes aren't committed. It's not a guarantee, but we need law enforcement. And the problem with the whole defund movement, which he has been a big supporter of, it dispirits law enforcement. They're having a hard time recruiting members, and we aren't going to have the law enforcement officers we're going to need to reduce crime.
All right. No police officers in this country were more dispirited than the ones who were present at the United States Capitol on January 6th.
Please hold off. Please hold off on that. Audience, please.
I'm sorry.
I'm trying to tell the audience, please, so go ahead.
140 officers injured, one crushed in a revolving door, another hit in the head with a fire extinguisher, another stabbed with a metal stake. So this talk about support for law enforcement, it's not real. It's not true, because he decided to play politics when the person he didn't want to win the presidential election.
You're right there. You have to end it.
I immediately and forcefully and repeatedly condemned the violence on January 6th, unlike my opponent, who basically just ignores the 570 riots, the 2,000 law enforcement officers injured during the summer riots, and he incited the Kenosha riots. The night after the first riot, Lieutenant Governor Barnes held a press conference and said it sure looked like it was a vendetta carried out against a member of the community. Rather than providing the manpower, he incited 2 more nights of riots. That's a pretty miserable record when it comes to law.
Mr. Barnes.
It has to be said that he called those folks patriots. He called them tourists, the people who were beating up police officers in the United States Capitol, the people that were there to protect him. He said he wasn't afraid. He said if they were Black Lives Matter or Antifa, he may have been afraid. But because they were the people who he riled up, of course he wasn't afraid. Well, thank you so much. I have someone in the audience, Connie, who was expecting And it was the most joyous time for her, but that joy was short-lived. What she thought were twins was actually a cancerous tumor forming. She had some very difficult conversations she never expected to have. And she had an abortion. That was her choice to make. In Ron Johnson's America, women don't get to make the best choice for their health. Rape victims don't get to make the best health care or don't get to make the choices for themselves. That's the unfortunate reality. I support us going back to Roe versus Wade. That was a law of the land that worked for 50 years. And Roe also allowed for some restrictions, but the reality is it has strong protections for the health and the life of the mother. And that's what we should be moving towards. Senator Johnson has sponsored 8 different national abortion bans. He sponsored abortion bans that had no exceptions for rape, incest, or the life of the mother. And that position is too out of touch and extreme for Wisconsin.
All right, and so
As Justice Alito said, this is a profound moral issue. And what I propose is probably, from my standpoint, the best way we can finally come after 50 years. This wasn't solved 50 years ago. This has been a divisive issue for 50 years. I proposed a one-time, single-issue referendum to decide at what point does society have the responsibility to protect life, balancing the rights of a mother with the rights of an unborn child. I can't think of a better way of solving this problem once and for all where most people would accept the results. In that scenario, I would have one vote. But the extreme position when it comes to abortion is the one that the Lieutenant Governor holds, which would allow abortions up to the moment of birth. Think of that. That is not where Wisconsinites are.
Well, I support comprehensive immigration reform. It's quite simple. I support a path to citizenship for dreamers and their families, a system that treats people with respect and dignity and doesn't subject our children to the horrors of family separation. Now, I've had a chance to travel this entire state as Lieutenant Governor. One of the biggest concerns I had was that we don't have comprehensive immigration reform in this country. It makes it harder for small businesses. It makes it harder for our farmers. Everywhere I go, people can agree that a path to citizenship isn't just the humane thing to do, it's also good for our economy. Now, we have people like Senator Johnson who spent 12 years in office. All he'll do is complain. When he gets a chance to make his statement, I guarantee you it'll be a complaint. It won't be about a single thing that he's done to fix the immigration issue in this country. Now, we can do this. We can keep the border safe. We can treat people with dignity, but only if we have people who are serious about doing the work.
Well, as Chairman of Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee, I held probably 36 hearings on some aspects of our open border and our broken immigration system. I worked with Senator Kyrsten Sinema, Democrat Senator Kyrsten Sinema, with DHS. We developed something called Operation Safe Return. That actually morphed into Return to Mexico, which pretty well solved the problem of unaccompanied children and families abusing our asylum laws. We actually cut our single adults coming across the border illegally in half until Democrat presidential debates where Democrats said they'd stop deportations and offer free health care. Then, of course, President Biden came into office. The border completely opened up. We're dealing with 7,000 people per day being encountered. It's out of control, and the flow of deadly drugs is killing our people, and the human depredations of the human traffickers is largely overlooked and being hidden by this administration and mainstream media. Real tragedies of President Biden's and Democrats' open border policy is because we were so close to having a secure enough border where we could move toward legal immigration reform. I was working with the previous administration. We had a really good system, take about 100 visas down to about 6, award them based on a metric system tied to our economy, and we were also going to take care of the DACA kids and the people you're talking about. But President Biden came into office, blew open the border, and removed that first necessary step that we must take. You can't offer amnesty and still have a wide open border, or you'll have a flood of millions more people coming to this country illegally, being abused by the human traffickers. Again, abused by the human traffickers. It's horrific what is happening. How do you think young women pay off their human trafficking fees? You know, the border's secure on the Mexican side of the border. Nobody comes across this country without either paying or being indebted to human traffickers. This is a travesty. This is the Democrat policy, is an open border, a flood of illegal immigrants.
Thank you.
Mr.
Well,
Barnes.
this is again the senator using fear mongering. As I said before, he's going to continue to use it in every issue. Now, the reality is the infrastructure bill actually had provisions for border modernization, but Senator Johnson couldn't be bothered to vote for it because he didn't even read the infrastructure bill. He didn't know what was in it. And so if he was very serious about solving a problem, he would have taken the time to do his job, but instead he'd rather play politics and make talking points. Now, we're talking about folks, the people he's trying to make you afraid of. We're talking about people who are working here, people who are paying taxes, contributing to society, contributing to the community, people who should have a path to citizenship. And Senator Johnson wants to talk about a labor or workforce shortage. These are people who are here already doing the hard work, and Ron Johnson wants to do whatever with them. He wants their experience, he wants them to live in limbo. He wants them to continue to live in the shadows.